I have noticed a recurring pattern coming up in my research, which is that of finding German entrepreneurs and settlements dating from the 19th century, whenever I have researched cities situated along the Mississippi and Ohio rivers. This has piqued my interest, and I'm going to look specifically for historical German influences found in cities along these two rivers. While some of what I will include in this two-part video series is from previous research, much will be from new research. My name is Michelle Gibson. What we are told is that in the decade from 1845 to 1855, more than 1 million Germans fled to the United States to escape economic hardship, and that altogether over 7.5 million immigrants came to the United States between 1820 and 1870, primarily from Ireland and China. Many of the German immigrants were said to have had enough money to journey to the Midwest in search of farmland and work, unlike the Irish and Chinese who typically ended up in large cities on the coasts in low-paying menial jobs. According to our historical narrative, the Germans sought to escape the political unrest caused by riots, rebellion, and the revolutions of 1848, which were a series of political upheavals throughout Europe that year, with the aim of removing the old monarchical structures and creating independent nation-states, and was the most widespread revolutionary wave in Europe's history, with 50 countries being affected. The most important of these revolutions were in France, the Netherlands, Italy, the Austrian Empire, and the states of the German Confederation that would make up the German Empire in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. There are some things I would like to point out about the Mississippi River and Nile River before I jump into the subject matter I have chosen to investigate in this video. I have drawn a red line on the world map to demonstrate that there is a straight west to east linear relationship between the location of the Mississippi River Delta and that of the Nile River Delta. The Mississippi River, also known as the Father of Waters, flows southward 2,320 miles, or 3,730 kilometers, from its source at Lake Itasca in Minnesota, not far from Lake Superior and the Great Lakes region of North America, to the Mississippi Delta in southeastern Louisiana. The Nile River, also known as the Father of African Rivers, and along with its major tributary, the White Nile, is 4,130 miles, or 6,650 kilometers long. The source of the White Nile is Lake Victoria in what is called the Great Lakes region of Central Africa. The source of the Blue Nile is Lake Tana, a sacred lake in Ethiopia, and it joins the White Nile to become the Nile at Khartoum, the capital of Sudan. From Khartoum, the Nile flows northward to the Nile Delta. Here is a side-by-side comparison of the Mississippi River and the Nile River, as well as what the Mississippi River Delta and the Nile River Delta look like together in person. This is an aerial view of the Mississippi River Delta, which is on the southeastern coast of Louisiana, showing many geometric and straight channels. And the same type of straight geometric channels are also found in the Nile River Delta. I'm going to first look at the Mississippi River Valley. With a starting point of New Orleans, located a short distance northwest of the Mississippi River Delta region. And what I found out was that there was a substantial German contribution to the New Orleans economy in the 19th century, where apparently before the American Civil War, New Orleans was the largest German colony below the Mason-Dixon line. The Mason-Dixon line was a line of demarcation between the northern states and southern states surveyed in the 1760s, before the Civil War. This work will expose evidence of a hidden hand of a small number of related elitist family bloodlines hiding in different nationalities and religions, along with other allies, to carry out their plans for complete power and control over the world. We are told that German immigrants started arriving in New Orleans from the time it was founded in 1718. It is interesting for me to note that 1717 is the exact midpoint year between 1492 and 1942, boundary years for what I believe was a 3D time loop that was created by negative beings to hijack the original positive timeline humanity was on. Everything was grafted onto the existing infrastructure on the earth and falsely attributed in the new historical narrative. The world history we have been taught is filled with war and violence, death and destruction, which was not our original evolutionary path. There are 450 years in between 1492 and 1942, and halfway at 225 years is 1717. In that same year, the premier Grand Lodge of England, the first Freemasonic Grand Lodge, was founded in London on June 24th of 1717. This Star City depiction of New Orleans was circa 1763. We are told that the construction of St. Mary's Assumption Church was completed in 1860 for the expanding number of German Catholics settling in the lower garden section of the city. And apparently St. Alphonsus, not far from St. Mary's Assumption Church, was completed in 1857 for the burgeoning Irish Catholic immigrant population in New Orleans' lower garden section as well. There was an explosion of parentless children in the 19th century, and New Orleans was no exception to this occurrence. In addition to the German Protestant orphanage, established in 1867, and the German Evangelical Lutheran Bethlehem Orphanage, established in the 1880s, there was a whole host of orphanages and houses of refuge in New Orleans. With countless children of all ages institutionalized in palatial residences. Why all the kids? Along with the explosion of parentless children in the 19th century, there was the systematic introduction of hard liquor and beer into the adult population, occurring at the same time, starting as early as 1830 with the establishment of Teacher's Scotch whiskey in Scotland. I already know we will come to many examples in this video of the development of breweries and distilleries in the 19th century, starting in New Orleans, at one time the biggest beer brewing city in the South. The Jackson Brewery in New Orleans, known by the shortened version of Jack's, was established in 1890 by Lawrence Faubacker and in business until the 1970s, after which time it was converted into a shopping mall. The Dixie Brewery was established in 1907 by Valentine Mertz and is still in business as a brewery as of 2019, though the original building was severely damaged in 2005 by Hurricane Katrina and never reopened. And the Falstaff Brewery, operating in New Orleans between 1936 and 1978, and the building was later repurposed for apartment living space. There's a lot more of all things German to find in New Orleans, so I will just mention a few more before I go up the Mississippi River to find more examples. Kolb's Restaurant was established by Conrad Kolb in 1899 and closed its doors in 1994. The Jung Hotel on Canal Street was said to have been constructed between 1927 and 1928. And the Hotel Grunewald, a 504-room hotel said to have been built by German immigrant Louis Grunewald in 1893, and now known as the Roosevelt New Orleans of the Waldorf Astoria hotel chain. Immediately after leaving New Orleans, I stumbled upon the German coast in my research, a region of early Louisiana German settlement along the Mississippi River comprised of the present-day Acadiana, or French Louisiana parishes of St. Charles, St. John the Baptist, and St. James. German immigrants were settled along this Mississippi River region in 1718 by John Law and the Company of the Indies. I'm going to digress from the German focus of this video for a moment, because I believe this information about John Law and the Company of the Indies is a significant finding. John Law was a Scottish gambler turned economist and banker who served as Controller General of Finances for his friend Philippe II, Duke of Orleans, regent for the juvenile Louis XV of France. After escaping prison and execution in London for killing an opponent in a duel in 1694, Law fled to the European continent and traveled for 10 years. He continued to make good money from gambling and made acquaintances that were useful to him later, like the Duke of Orleans. While he was in the Netherlands, he studied the Amsterdam Exchange Bank and the Dutch East India Company, also known as the VOC. The Dutch East India Company was the world's most valuable company of all time, worth $7.9 trillion as a standalone company. Law was intrigued by these things working together, bankers accepting shares as collateral for loans, and conversely, borrowing to buy new shares, in an interaction between the stock market and lenders that produced a new kind of economy. With these ideas, Law devised a system based on paper money, and within which he was convinced that in order for an economy to work well, credit was necessary. In his book, Money and Trade Considered, he used terms like money supply, inflation, and the relationship between money and labor, as well as taxation being applied across all socioeconomic levels. His proposals were rejected by the Scottish Parliament, but the Duke of Orleans was prepared to give it a go. In 1716, John Law set up a public bank in France known as the General Private Bank, issuing paper money against deposits of gold and silver. It met with success, and in 1717, the French government approved Law's proposal to merge a number of existing businesses under the name Company of the Indies, which was also known as the Mississippi Company, comprising a vast area of 8 states, which at that time belonged to France, and Law became the company's chief director in 1718. The Mississippi Company acquired important monopolies in the tobacco trade, exclusive trading rights in Louisiana, the Mississippi River Valley, China, East India, and South America. The General Private Bank became the Royal Bank in 1718, which meant that the banknotes were guaranteed by the king. The key to the Royal Bank agreement was that France's national debt would be paid by the revenues coming from the opening of the Mississippi Valley. The Mississippi Company boomed on paper. However, it only took 2 years for the bubble to burst in 1720. What does all of this have to do with today? I'm seeing the underpinnings of everything. For one thing, all of this certainly sounds like the genesis of the financial and economic system under which the world has been operating for quite some time. For another, it illustrates one of the mechanisms by which the New World Order was created from the Old World Order, the Earth's original ancient advanced civilization, and control of the financial system and resources was undertaken, as well as everything else, in this new world. It is interesting to note that the original Ouachita National Bank opened in Monroe, Louisiana in 1906. Before closing in 1933, the Ouachita National Bank printed 6 different types of national currency and moved twice during that 27-year period. Monroe was the ancient imperial seat of the Ouachita Empire in an area known as Ouachita proper. Known as the Mound Builders of Mu and the Ancient Ones, the Ouachita Moors were formally recognized by the United Nations in 1993 as the oldest indigenous civilization on Earth. Watson Break on the left is an archaeological site in Ouachita Parish, Louisiana, dated to 5,400 years ago, and is the oldest earthwork mound complex in North America, acknowledged to be older than the Egyptian pyramids and Stonehenge in England. It is located on private land, so it is not available for public viewing. It is compared with Stonehenge on the right, which has an earthwork very similar to Watson Brake around its perimeter, according to what we are told, dated to starting at 3100 BC, about 5100 years ago. The next place I'm going to look at in the Mississippi River Valley is Baton Rouge, the capital of Louisiana. The modern history of Baton Rouge dates to 1721, and it becomes the state capital in 1849. On another side note, it is interesting to note that the old Louisiana State Capitol building, called a castle, was said to have been constructed between 1847 and 1852, and since 1990 serves as the Museum of Political History. It was replaced as the state capitol building by this one, with its construction said to have been completed in 1931, which would have been during the Great Depression. The German community in Baton Rouge was said to have its origins in Pennsylvania German settlers, the name given to immigrants from modern-day Germany, the Netherlands, and Switzerland. These particular German settlers came from Bayou Manchac after flooding in the 1780s. In search of higher ground to live along a line of bluffs south of Baton Rouge, and came to be known locally as Dutch Highlanders. We are told Baton Rouge's historic Highland Road was established as a supply road for the indigo and cotton plantations of the early settlers. Today, Highland Road is where you find luxury homes and high-end real estate in Baton Rouge. Highland Road is known as the Miracle Mile between Louisiana State University, where there are two mounds believed to be more than 5,000 years old, and, along with Watson Brake, considered to be part of the oldest mound system in North America, and the Country Club of Louisiana. One of my first ahas in my awareness of the advanced ancient civilization that was hidden in the landscape all around us was the realization that golf courses were a cover-up of mound sites. Just carve out the top of a mound, and voila, you have a bunker. And the existence of two acknowledged ancient mound sites at Louisiana State University across town from the Country Club of Louisiana just underscores that belief for me. The next place we come to in the lower Mississippi Valley is Natchez in Mississippi. Named for the Natchez people, a matrilineal kinship society who inhabited the region historically before the arrival of Europeans. One of the largest mounds in North America is Emerald Mound, located on the Natchez Trace Parkway near Stanton, Mississippi, and served as one of the main ceremonial centers for the Natchez people prior to European contact. The Natchez Bluffs and Under the Hill Historic District are bounded roughly by South Canal Street, Broadway, and the Mississippi River. There are some interesting things to point out in this location. Fort Rosalie was nearby on South Canal Street. If there was once a canal here, there is not one any longer. No longer standing, Fort Rosalie was said to have been built in 1716 when it was part of the French colonial empire. Fort Rosalie was situated close to the main ceremonial center, known as the Grand Village of the Natchez. The Natchez Bluffs, running alongside of the Mississippi River, most definitely don't even look close to a natural feature. Yet there is nothing I can find to say that it was man-made. This is Natchez's Under the Hill district, with its mud-flooded appearance. Did I find an historical German presence in Natchez? I most certainly did. While there had been some early arrivals in the late 1700s, the German Jewish community in Natchez started to organize in the 1840s, many of whom opened retail stores in the Under the Hill district. Interesting, there would be a cotton bowl in the Star of David pictured here. Apparently, according to an 1858 survey, 8 out of 12 Jewish businesses in Natchez traded in clothing or dry goods, merchants like Aaron Beekman. After the Civil War, the Natchez Jewish community continued to grow in size and prominence. It is interesting to note there was a Monsanto Chemical Company connection to Natchez. The Monsanto brothers, Benjamin and Jacob, were from a Sephardic Jewish slave trading family originating in Spain and ended up coming to live in Natchez. Benjamin Monsanto, a slaveholder and seller, purchased the cotton-producing Glenfield plantation in 1787. A Natchez Monsanto descendant by the name of Olga Mendez Monsanto married John Francis Queeny, who founded the Monsanto Chemical Company in St. Louis in 1901 and named it after his wife's family. Monsanto means sacred or holy mountain in Spanish and Portuguese. The first product the Monsanto Chemical Company manufactured was saccharin, which Queeny sold to the Meyer Brothers Drug Company in St. Louis. Monsanto was acquired by the German multinational Bayer Pharmaceutics and Life Sciences Company after gaining United States and EU regulatory approvals on June 7th of 2018. And Monsanto's name is no longer used. Natchez is considered to have the greatest concentration of splendid antebellum mansions in the United States. The Longwood Mansion, also known as Nutt's Folly, is the largest octagonal house in the United States at 30,000 square feet, or almost 2,800 square meters, and 6 floors. Said to have been built by local cotton planter Holler Nutt, spelled N-U-T-T, who was said to have wanted something unusual for his family home and was intrigued by octagonal homes. He decided to build it in 1860 to replace his first home and started construction shortly after. Estimates of as many as 1 million bricks were made for the house. The Civil War started and construction was halted after only the first floor was completed. The family moved in with the intention that they would return to complete the house after the war was over. Work halted in 1861 with only 9 rooms on the basement floor completed. Holler died at the age of 48 from pneumonia, and his wife Julia was left to raise their 11 children in poverty in the lower level of the home. After the last child who lived passed away, the home was sold to Kelly McAdams in 1968 for $200,000. She repaired the home for 2 years, leaving the upper levels unfinished to show what war can do. She gave the home to a local association, the Pilgrimage Garden Club, with the agreement that the home never be finished. What a strange story. The colonnaded onion dome of Longwood Mansion on the left reminds me of the one at the Colt Armory in Hartford, Connecticut in the middle, and on the right, the one at the Pina National Palace in Sintra, Portugal. Something tells me the master builder, ancestors of the enslaved people working on the plantations for wealthy landowners, were the ones that built all of the splendid mansions. The next place I'm going to look at is Vicksburg in Mississippi, the county seat of Warren County, and located roughly halfway between Memphis and New Orleans at the confluence of the Mississippi and Yazoo rivers. We are told French colonists were the first Europeans to settle the area, which was part of the historical territory of the Natchez people, and it was the French who built Fort St. Pierre in 1719. On the high bluffs at Redwood on the Yazoo River. Perhaps Vicksburg is best known for the Vicksburg Campaign and siege during the American Civil War, which took place between 1862 and 1863, and at the end of which the Union forces under General Ulysses S. Grant captured the Confederate stronghold of Vicksburg and divided the Confederacy. Along with the Battle of Gettysburg in July of 1863, it was considered a turning point in the American Civil War. We are told that after the Vicksburg National Military Park was established in 1899, the nation's leading architects and sculptors were commissioned to honor the soldiers and sailors from their respective states that fought in the Vicksburg campaign, leading it to be called the Art Park of the World, with more than 1,400 monuments found throughout the park, like the Mississippi Memorial, the Michigan Memorial, and the Illinois State Memorial. The Vicksburg National Military Park also hosts the USS Cairo, spelled C-A-I-R-O, one of 7 river ironclads named after towns along the upper Mississippi and Ohio rivers. I will be including mention of Cairo, Illinois, later in the second part of this video series. The Shirley House is said to be the only surviving wartime structure inside the Vicksburg National Military Park. This is a wartime picture of the Shirley House circa 1863, with what is described as the camp of the 45th Illinois Infantry behind it. But there are things going on in this photo that don't make sense to me. Why all the digging and entrances? Apparently, during the siege of Vicksburg, the people of the city dug caves into the sides of hills to get out of harm's way from all the hail of iron that was coming their way from Union forces. A possible explanation, but is it plausible? This photo was notated as Union soldiers on the lawn of the Warren County Courthouse after the siege. It was said to have been constructed between 1858 and 1860. Interesting to note the contrast between the size of the soldiers and that of the courthouse. Considered to be Vicksburg's most historic structure, a museum is operated within the old courthouse today. The mud-flooded-looking Washington Hotel in Vicksburg was said to have been used as a military hospital during the Civil War. There was a castle in Vicksburg which was said to have been built in the 1850s, including a moat, but it was destroyed by the Union Army and the site turned into an artillery battery. This is what I found about Vicksburg's German Jewish community, dating to early in the city's history. Back when I was doing research about Monroe in Louisiana for a different video, I found Joseph Biedenharn, a German-American businessman from Vicksburg, whose parents immigrated to the United States following the revolutions of 1848. Joseph was a candy maker, the first bottler of Coca-Cola, and the first to develop an independent network of franchise bottlers to distribute the drink. This was his original company building in Vicksburg. He moved his Coca-Cola manufacturing and bottling operations to Monroe from Vicksburg in 1913. The same soft drink that dissolves stuff, like teeth. Rust. Unclogs drains. And contains Monsanto's artificial sweeteners in the diet version. Along with his son Malcolm and other investors, Joseph Biedenharn bought a crop dusting business in 1925, added 18 planes to the fleet, and moved the company headquarters from Macon, Georgia to Monroe. Crop dusting involves the spraying of crops with pesticides and fertilizers, like other Monsanto products. Also, it is interesting to note that Biedenharn's crop dusting business was the origin of Delta Airlines, which was incorporated in December of 1928, and Delta's headquarters moved from Monroe to Atlanta, Georgia in 1941. The next place we come to is Memphis, a city situated on the Chickasaw Bluffs of the Mississippi River. In land historically inhabited by the Chickasaw people, one of the 5 civilized tribes, along with the Cherokee, Seminole, Creek, and Choctaw. The majority of people in the 5 civilized tribes were removed to Indian Territory in the 1830s, now the state of Oklahoma, after President Andrew Jackson signed into law the Indian Removal Act in 1830, giving him the authority to grant them lands west of the Mississippi in exchange for their ancestral lands. As a matter of fact, Andrew Jackson, before he was president, along with John Overton and James Winchester, were credited with the founding of Memphis on May 22nd of 1819, and named after the ancient capital of Egypt on the Nile River. Downtown Memphis is situated on what is called Chickasaw Bluff No. 4. This feature in the river across from it caught my attention, so I searched around for what it was called. I found out that it is called Mud Island River Park. At the tip of Mud Island, which is actually a peninsula and not an island, the Mud Island River Park is accessible by ferry, car, foot, and monorail suspension railway. Mud Island has, among other things, a 5,000-seat amphitheater and a hydraulic scale model of the lower Mississippi River from Cairo, Illinois to New Orleans, Louisiana. The Memphis Pyramid is nearby, with a 1991 construction date given, and it was utilized as a sports arena, church, and entertainment venue until it was converted into a Bass Pro Shops superstore, which opened in 2015. I had already encountered the German Jewish department stores established in Memphis in previous research. Many customers perceived Goldsmith's department store on Main Street as Memphis's greatest store. With its beginnings at its Beale Street location, in 1870 the German immigrant Goldsmith brothers, Isaac and Jacob, started doing business in Memphis. This was the Goldsmith Brothers store on Main Street starting in 1895, and became a true department store in 1902, when they arranged merchandise by departments, among the first in the South to do so. The Crest department store in Memphis was the first opened in 1896 in what was to become a nationwide chain of five and dime stores, and moved to this new location on Main Street, said to have been designed by E.J.T. Hoffman and built in 1927. In 1980, the Crest store became McCrory's, and the store finally closed in 1994. We are told that due to being conscious of the historical significance of the building, the structure was restored and is now a museum. Elias Lowenstein immigrated to Memphis from Germany in 1854, where he opened Lowenstein's department store, prominent in Memphis for 125 years. He was a leader in the Memphis Jewish community and contributed liberally, we are told, to rebuilding the city of Memphis after the disastrous yellow fever epidemic in 1878, the worst American outbreak of yellow fever occurring in the Mississippi River Valley that year. The outbreak originated in New Orleans in the spring and summer of that year and spread up the Mississippi River and inland. Yellow fever was so named because of the yellowish hue of the skin and eyes it causes, affecting multiple organ systems and causing internal bleeding. What we are told is that in July of 1878, an outbreak of yellow fever was reported in Vicksburg, so Memphis officials stopped travel to the city from the south. However, a man from a quarantined steamboat slipped away and went to Cape Bionda's restaurant in Memphis on August 4th. He was hospitalized and quarantined the next day and died, and Cape Bionda became Memphis's first death from yellow fever on August 13th, and from there the yellow fever infections spread quickly throughout Memphis. We are told emphatically mosquitoes were the carriers of yellow fever. Elias Lowenstein was said to have built his mansion in 1891, called one of the most important Victorian Romanesque mansions in Memphis and one of the finest of its style in the South. This is an illustration of the original Lowenstein's department store in Memphis, said to have been built in 1886, with its classic mudflood feature of the slanted pavement from the ground level windows in front of the building to the not ground level windows with the slant of the pavement and showing dirt-covered streets as well. The original Lowenstein's department store building, vacated by the Lowensteins in the 1920s, was first taken over by a furniture company who eventually moved out in 1980, and the building sat vacant for 30 years. It was saved from demolition and today houses apartment and retail space. New Madrid is next, the seat of New Madrid County on the Missouri side of the Mississippi River's Kentucky Bend. And best known for the New Madrid earthquakes, 3 of which in the winter of 1811 and 1812 were estimated to be the largest earthquakes ever recorded in the United States, that the USGS estimated were between 7 and 8 on the Richter scale. The first large one took place on December 16th of 1811, the second one on January 23rd of 1812, and the third large one on February 7th of 1812. Descriptions of what happened during the first one included rolling ground, uprooted trees, huge chasms opening up and swallowing whatever was above, the Mississippi River flowing backwards, and general pandemonium from frightened people. The series of earthquakes in the New Madrid region dramatically affected the landscape, causing bank failures along the Mississippi River, destroying entire communities, causing landslides along the Chickasaw Bluffs, and liquefied subsurface sediment spread over a large area at great distances. Liquefaction was described as widespread and severe. Sand blows, described as large sandy deposits resulting from an eruption of water and sand to the ground surface, formed over an area of 4,015 square miles, or 10,400 square kilometers. Well, this would certainly explain the mud-flooded appearance of places I have found along the Mississippi River, as that is what the liquefaction of Earth results in. This is a photograph of soil liquefaction that occurred during the 7.5 magnitude earthquake that occurred on September 28th of 2018 on the island of Sulawesi in Indonesia. St. Francis Sunken Lands Wildlife Management Area in northeastern Arkansas today sank during the New Madrid earthquakes, turning once fertile and abundant landscape into a swamp. It is interesting to note that after all of this devastation, it took 3 years to get federal action on disaster relief for the region with the onset of the War of 1812. Congress finally approved $50,000 for the New Madrid Relief Act on February 17th of 1815, making it the nation's first disaster relief of its kind. The act provided that anyone who lost land due to the earthquakes was eligible to receive between 160 and 640 like acres of land elsewhere in Missouri. What we are told ended up happening was land agents arriving in the area to buy up the acreage and conned many New Madrid residents, offering them pennies on the dollar, and speculators subsequently claimed the new lands, and that of the 516 certificates issued by Congress, only 20 went to New Madrid residents, with most being held by people in St. Louis. In the years following, the fertile floodplain land was developed for growing cotton. Today, New Madrid is the second leading producer of cotton in the state of Missouri, and the percentage of organic farming in New Madrid County indicates none. One more thing before leaving New Madrid. This signage about the New Madrid earthquakes explains that the city was destroyed and very few people died because the population was sparse. This is the New Madrid County Courthouse today, said to have been built between 1915 and 1919 in classical Greek revival style. The next place we come to on the Mississippi River is St. Louis, the second largest city in Missouri after Kansas City. Prior to European settlement, St. Louis was a hub of the original Mississippian civilization, with Cahokia Mounds in the area being a major regional center. For purposes of comparison, this is a photo of a tree and soil-covered mound at Teotihuacan outside of Mexico City that was said to have been taken in 1832. These next two photos were taken of Teotihuacan in 1905, a few years prior to the beginning of the first major excavations of the site. Here's a comparison on the left of Monk's Mound at Cahokia and the Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan on the right, with all of the ground cover removed, and similar stairways and directional orientation. There were numerous major earthworks inside the St. Louis city boundaries, which was nicknamed the Mound City, that were mostly destroyed during the city's development. These photos document the destruction of what was called Big Mound in St. Louis in 1869. In an 1819 land survey, Army engineers counted 25 mounds from Biddle Street north to Mound Street, east of Broadway, and north of Laclede's Landing. In another comparison with Teotihuacan, there was an extensive pyramid temple complex there. I'm going to give one example in St. Louis of German Jewish business practices because it is a comprehensive example of what has taken place here. The Anheuser-Busch Brewing Company is headquartered in St. Louis. This is a postcard of it from the 1930s. Today, the company employs over 30,000 people and operates 12 breweries in the United States. It was founded as a Bavarian brewery in 1852 by George Schneider, but financial problems forced him to sell the brewery to various owners during the late 1850s, one of which was Eberhard Anheuser, a prosperous soap and candle maker. The name of the brewery became E. Anheuser and Company in 1860. A wholesaler who had immigrated from Germany to St. Louis in 1857, Adolphus Bush, became Eberhard Anheuser's son-in-law in 1861. He was the 21st of 22 children in a family that did well financially, selling winery and brewery supplies in Germany's state of Hesse. After serving in the Union Army during the American Civil War for 6 months, Adolphus Bush returned to St. Louis and began working for the brewery. Soon he became a partner and served as company secretary until his father-in-law died in 1880, at which time he became president of the business. During the 1870s, Adolphus Bush had toured Europe to study changes in brewing methods at the time. In particular, he was interested in the Pilsner beer of the town of Budweiser, located in what is now the Czech Republic. In 1876, he introduced Budweiser. And 1876 was the same year he introduced refrigerated railroad cars to transport beer. By 1877, the company owned a fleet of 40 refrigerated railroad cars. Expanding the company's distribution range led to increased demand for their products, and the company expanded its facilities in St. Louis during the 1870s. Bush implemented pasteurization in 1878 as a way to keep beer fresh for a longer period of time. He established the St. Louis Refrigerator Car Company in 1878, and by 1888, the company owned 850 cars. In addition to refrigeration and pasteurization, Bush adopted vertical integration as a business practice, in which he bought all the components of his business, from bottling factories to ice manufacturing plants to buying the rights from Rudolph Diesel to manufacture all diesel engines in America. This illustration was of the Bevo bottling facility in St. Louis. Vertical integration is where the supply chain of a company is owned by the company. It secures the supplies needed by the company to produce its product and the market needed to sell it. It is a way to consolidate control over production and increase profits for the company. It was a common practice during this era. He also founded the Manufacturers Railway Company in 1887, which operated until 2011. Adolphus Bush died in 1913, a textbook case of how to accumulate immense wealth. His net worth was $60 million at the time of his death. The Bush Entertainment Corporation, which was founded in 1959, became SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment in 2009 with its sale to the Blackstone Group, an American multinational private equity, asset management, and financial services firm based in New York City. It sure seems like the German Jewish businessmen in the 19th century were laying the groundwork for the consolidation of vast wealth for the few in the world in which we live today. I think we are looking at the implementation of what is known as Zionism. Zionism as a political movement started in 1897. the year the first Zionist Congress was held in Basel, Switzerland, which was convened by Theodor Herzl for the small minority of Jewry in agreement with the implementation of the Zionist goals. It was after the first Zionist Congress that the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion was first published in Russia in 1903, a text describing a Jewish plan for global domination. It has been widely called an anti-Semitic forgery. But was it really a forgery? I will expand on my findings about all of this in the second and last part of the series, after I take a look for the same kinds of things in the Ohio River Valley.